Hey guys, welcome back to another walkthrough for Season 1 of Dragonflight. This is going to be on one of the 4 new dungeons called Ruby Life Pools. And so since it's one of the new ones, I'm a little less knowledgeable about it, but I've compiled everything I've learned so far in this video. Uh, and I'll talk about everything I can think of as we go. Now compared to like Halls of Valor, my first walkthrough that I released, this is going to be a lot more intense in each given fight, I would say. There's a lot more mechanics going on, and I'll try my best to pause and talk about all of them. And also, before I forget, this is a huge heavy magic damage dungeon. A lot more magic damage than usual. Every single boss in here, all 3 bosses cast a lot of magic. Pretty much every mob does magic damage of some sort, mixed in with their physical damage attacks. So I'm playing Vengeance Demon Hunter here. This is a 16 fortified thundering Ruby Life Pools. This first guy, you don't have to worry too much as a tank. He just kind of melees and then casts a bunch of ground effects that you dodge. You should know that when you walk into any of the existing ground effects, they deal pretty high damage to you, so just try to avoid them as best you can. Now you could fight them with just these 2 mobs plus the 3 back here, and that's probably a good first pull, but you want to pull them back to this open area and this water area so that you have more space to fight them. However, if you're a little bit more experienced, you can pull all these mobs into the 3-pack that I just mentioned right here. And then you can also pull the next pack, which I'm about to pull, and then fight out here where there's more space as well. But as long as you fight in one of those 2 locations, either out here or back in that water area, then you should be fine. Now, the whole name of the game here in this first trash area is the Earth Shapers and the Chill Weavers. These are all the important mobs. Everything else doesn't really matter too much. The Whelps don't do much. The Terra Sentry mobs just kind of attack the tank. And that's about it. But the Earth Shapers are crucial to stop their Tectonic Slam cast. There's 3 of them total in this big pull that I did. And they all cast pretty shortly into the pull, but we couldn't see it on my screen because I was still gathering the pack, and my DPS probably sunned them and took care of them because they knew about it. So that's all the Earth Shapers do. They cast a cast that has to be stopped with stuns or knocks. You cannot interrupt it. But then to make it more challenging, these Chill Weaver casters are casting this Ice Shield ability, and there's 2 of them in this pull. There's one more right there, and there's one casting right here. So they're going to be the important marks for people to kick. There's a giant circle from the big mob. Don't worry much about that, just move out of it. So these guys cast Ice Bolt as well. These are the Chill Weaver mobs in the back here. You cast Ice Bolt, that doesn't do a ton of damage to you. It probably will on higher key levels as the tank, so that may be something to worry about eventually, but right now we have too much going on in this pull to worry about those at all. So the big thing is Ice Shield. So Ice Shield is casting on something in this stack of mobs right here. What it's going to do is every time Ice Shield ticks, it gives the mob a certain amount of shield. So it's this Terra Sentry mob, you can kind of see a little shield there forming. And it ticks 5 times as it channels, so you want to kick it on the first tick if you can. That way the mob only gets 1 stack of the shield buff. And luckily the shield is also purgeable, and that's crucial because, oh, look how big that shield is. This Terra Sentry has like a 20% shield because of that cast. But the purge is important because if that were on the one of the 3 Earthshaper mobs, what it does is it prevents the mob from being stopped in any way. So it's like inspiring. It prevents it from being interrupted, stunned, knocked, you name it. So that's where these pulls will get very scary. We're kind of just powering through it because it's a low key, and everyone does high damage in this group. But as you get higher into the keys, then these combos of mobs will be very scary. One thing to note is I don't think the Chill Weavers can target themselves or other Chill Weavers with the shield. I could be wrong. Maybe they're just last in priority or something. But yeah, that was the first pull. That's a good lust pull on Fort. And then you keep going through this area as best you can, pulling more Chill Weavers and Earth Shapers. I'd say you kind of want to do this first area in like 2 or 3 pulls, if you can do it. If not, go a little bit smaller. The timer's pretty lenient. It's kind of a fast dungeon too, which is nice. But it is very punishing because of the amount of mechanics you have to know about. There are a lot of mechanics. So I'm actually pulling in more mobs here. I didn't do a very good job of pulling them in. My sigil like went on the ground and they aggroed and it missed all of them, so I didn't get threat and then died. So ignore that part, but the big thing to focus on here is just having somebody assigned to the Chill Weaver ice shields. I think a melee kick can get one every single time it casts. Maybe even a range kick. I don't know the cooldown on it. But when you say melee kick versus range kick, that's like a 15-second cooldown kick versus a 24-second cooldown kick, with the exception of boomkins. Alright, so we clean up this pull eventually. Let me just fast forward a little bit here. That's all the same trash. And I want to show a skip. I don't do this skip in the video, but you probably should do this. So there's a path that you can take right here. You can actually just walk all the way against this wall, and you don't have to break open an egg. Walking over an egg breaks them, by the way, so you want to avoid all those eggs. But you can actually just walk against this wall and pull only these humanoids. Probably want to include this guy in a prior pull, but you could pull only these humanoids plus the mini boss and skip the big rock dude. The big rock dude right here is something I end up pulling in this video, but you don't have to. So yeah, I'm just pulling more chill weavers. This is 2 chill weavers and 1 earth shaper in this pull. Tectonic slam just got interrupted by stormbolt right there. And these other 2 are just going to cast ice shield. So that was actually really good timing. He stormbolted the cast right before it got an ice shield, and if that had happened in a slightly different order, then we would have taken massive group damage if the slam went off. So again, I pull in this big rock guy, but you don't have to in these in more optimal routes, I should say. This is the same rock dude as the very first guy we fought. He just does these ground AoEs, and that's about it. Crushing Smash is a tank attack. That one went on the Treants because they were taunting him, which is nice. So we pulled in the last Chill Weaver. Again, this Chill Weaver would normally be fought with the mini boss coming up instead of this rock guy. All the whelps that come out of these eggs, we actually fought 2 a minute ago, but all these whelps come out of the eggs do give count. Just very, very little count. And they apply the Cold Claws debuff, which I'll talk more about on the boss, because they're the same whelps. So now what I'm doing is I'm pulling this mini boss to this area because it's much safer to fight here. He does a huge charge. Blazing Rush right here. It's about to go off. It's not going to go very far because he hits a wall. But if it were to go this direction, it would go way off the screen and we'd lose a lot of uptime. And if we were in the prior area, then it would probably pull some more mobs or some of the whelps out of the eggs. So this guy basically just does a physical tank channel and then alternates that with the Blazing Rush. Blazing Rush, if it hits someone, it's probably going to kill them. It also leaves a big dot if it doesn't kill them. So you really want to watch out for that. An audio cue weak ore would be good for that. I'll probably make one eventually. Blazing Rush. And that tank channel doesn't do that much damage as long as you have something up, as far as I can tell. He's on trees right now, so he's going to barrage the trees. He spawns those flame circles when he does the barrage, but that's about it. Blazing Rush, and then he dies. So yeah, ideally you want to pull like 2 of those Chill Weavers and the last Earth Shaper around the corner with the mini boss and just fight them all right there. Cleave them down, and then you'd fight the boss as your like 3rd or 4th pull of the dungeon. So this is the first boss, Melidrussa. You want to start the fight by just taunting her over. She's very hard to move, so if you start with taunt and just pull her to like right here, it makes space management a lot easier for the start of the fight, and that's like the ideal time to move her to before she starts casting over and over again. So this is a boss a lot like Jaina. You guys played in Battle for Azeroth. She just casts magic bolts at the tank the entire time. They're not kickable. They just do a lot of magic damage. Although Jaina actually did physical damage bolts, now that I think about it. It's a little bit different. Anyway, so she's a very heavy group damage boss. She does the hail bombs, which does damage to the group and drops those icicles everywhere. You can stack for those and move as a group if you want. And then she does that big vortex ability. I'll pause it next time I see it. And then at 69% or 70% rather, she does the first Awakened Whelps cast right here. And what that's going to do is, since she's on this quadrant of the room, it's going to summon whelps from the opposite quadrant of the room. Luckily, my whole party is here as well, because that's going to make it so the whelps kind of funnel into the group in one group instead of like spreading spreading out across the entire arena, which makes it much easier on you as the tank. So tell your group to stay relatively stacked, and it solves lots of problems in this fight. So as the whelps came in, I had a spirit bomb and an Emma aura ready for them. You want to do something similar on any tank class because they will probably end up killing someone if they attack someone at the same time all at once. And then the big mechanic on the whelps in this first whole area is the cold claws attack. You didn't really see anything cast it there successfully because everyone had cooldowns rolling. But I think on the next set of whelps I get lots of stacks, so I'll show you. Once again, this boss is very hard to move. As you can see, she didn't move there for quite a while. She cast the second Awakened Whelps at 40%, looks like. So this happened very, very fast because people used CDs on the first one and then instantly pushed her to the second one. This will be kind of hard on lower keys because nobody's going to have cooldowns for the second set this way. So the whelps came from the farthest area once again. You want to have something ready for them if possible. One of them's casting Cold Claws there. I think they can only cast one at a time, which is nice. But what that does is puts a debuff on you if it goes off. There it is. So this Cold Claws debuff is on my screen now. If that reaches 8 stacks currently, then I'll be frozen, and I'll probably die while I'm frozen for like 6 seconds or so. Now the other thing she does is this Frost Overload shield while her intermission phase is happening. So at 70% and 40%, she summons whelps and then starts this channel for like 10, I guess it's 15 seconds looks like. And if she finishes that channel, then the group's going to die. It's going to one-shot the group. A trash mob later in the dungeon does the same thing, actually. So this is going to be a big damage check. Everyone needs to have CDs for these whelps, if they can. And then she starts alternating her abilities again. So I have 3 stacks of Cold Claws right there. Looks like one of them actually hit me from this far away across the room. So as long as they start the ability on you, it's definitely going to connect, looks like. Once again, you get frozen currently at 8 stacks, although they keep changing that every week. So just make sure your healer knows to dispel you. Alright, so the other ability I was talking about earlier is this big AoE that goes on that player. Our Boomkin Tettles went all the way off the screen to drop it over there like a nice guy. And it just pulses AoE no matter how close you are to it. It kind of looks like one of those things that the farther you are, the less damage you take, but that's not the case. It pulses AoE for 3 or 4 ticks and then explodes for a higher amount of AoE at the end. So if you saw the party frames health there, everyone was taking small damage and then a big chunk at the very end of the cast. And that is the whole fight. She just alternates hail bombs, pelting the tank, and the Chill Storm ability. That's what it's called. Another thing to note is when the Chill Storm erupts on the last tick, it pushes you back a little bit. So you never want to be like right up next to these icicles, because that's how you take a bunch of damage and get a stack of that frozen application that we saw earlier. So you always want to be a healthy distance away from them, I would say. He's a huge pain in the ass to move, though, let me tell you. People are going to be like, tank? Move the boss? And you're going to be like, look where I am. I'm chilling in Narnia. Alright, so then you take these drakes up, just like the second boss of Necrotic Wake. There's some RP to take you to the next area. From now on in the dungeon, you spawn there as well. So when you die, you release, and you spawn and take the dragon up to this area. And from here, you have a choice. So that's the second boss you're looking at right there. You're going to have to make a full loop around the minimap. I decided to go left. I think that's probably the move for now, going left at the road here. You could go right and fight the fire dragon instead, but I think the thunder dragon is the better choice if you know you can kill it. Because, for one thing, it's the first mob you encounter. If you go right, you're going to have to fight this elemental on the minimap here first, and the patrol before it, while having to deal with this fire dragon's patrol that goes all around this area. And it's pretty hard to deal with. Now, the Thunderhead has a ton of mechanics, so I'll mention a few before I even pull him because he does them in such rapid succession. So as soon as you jump in, he's going to breathe lightning pretty much toward the group because everyone's going to be coming from this direction. So you want to aim him this way for several reasons, but your group has to be able to avoid his attack pretty early on into this pull, so make sure everyone's ready before you pull. But jump in, get thrown on these little guys. It's also something your healer is going to have to know, is they don't want to dispel this debuff on you on this pull specifically, because they need their dispel for the upcoming attack called Rolling Thunder. So I'm getting these debuffs from the little Scorchlings. He's doing his breath attack pretty early on. It's a huge funnel, goes super far, probably off the screen. As long as people are ready for it, they can dodge it and then stay close to the mob and dodge the rest from then on. Then he does this tank hit called Thunderjaw. And because I'm tanking him right here, it's not going to knock me back very far, just a few feet, because I'm technically like on an uphill slope, if that makes sense. If I was standing right here next to the dragon, away from the group, I would be sent all the way into the next pack, probably. It's a humongous knockback. So as you can see, I got knocked like just a little bit, that range right there. And it does pretty hefty combo of magic and physical damage, so be aware of that. That happens like every 15 seconds or so. And that's kind of a theme in this dungeon. So there's a second Thunderjaw right there. This one doesn't leave a dot. The Fire Dragon's hit does. There's no debuff, as you can see. And the other thing I want to talk about with this guy, let me back up, is the Rolling Thunder ability. This is the other very dangerous thing that your healer will have to know about. So for one, don't dispel the tank on pull. These Scorchlings will die, and then you just have to live that dot. The Thunderjaw will hit the tank shortly after. And then Rolling Thunder goes out right now. So the Rolling Thunder is going to apply a debuff to 2 players in the group. Let's see if we can catch which people get it before it gets dispelled. So it went on the Monk and the Druid. And what the healer is going to do, is going to dispel one of these players immediately. I think he dispels Tettles. And that just does a big burst of AoE damage to the group. Boom. So yeah, that's how much damage everyone took. Tettles took like 60% of his health in one hit. And then this other debuff is going to expire at some point and do the same thing. So the goal is to dispel one instantly and then heal up the group before the second one expires, while also dodging Storm Breath and the tank hit going on in between them as well. So this is a pretty challenging mob, to be honest. Both dragons are kind of crazy. Maybe the fire one is the play for less experienced groups starting out, so you might want to even just go right the first few weeks of Dragonflight. But I'll tell you why the fire one's going to be hard as well later on. And it should be mentioned that you probably have to kill one of these dragons in this area either way, because of how the second boss works with the pathing and the baiting and the distance you have to travel during the boss fight, which I'll talk about later. Alright, so now that we've killed Thunderhead, we're moving into these 4 elementals on the map. You can see them on the map, kind of like the Shards of Halkias and Shadowlands and Halls of Atonement. But each of these fire elementals has 2 casters with him. So the casters actually change a little bit throughout the area, but there's always going to be a combo of Cinder Weavers and Flame Dancers, which there's one over here, but there's not a second one in this pull. This pull, there's actually 2 Cinder Weavers, which is, in my opinion, the much harder combo. Cinder Weavers are difficult to deal with. So one thing you should know is I'm pulling back the Elemental and his friends so that they don't chain into that path that was right behind them. There's a path that kind of walks like pretty close up to where they chill at right here. You want to make sure those don't chain. That wipes the group pretty easily. So what you want to deal with on these Cinder Weavers is their Cinderbolt cast just goes on a random player, including you, as the tank, but it's very deadly, so you want to make sure you can kick as many of those as you can. And the only other ability they do is called, I gotta pull up my notes, Burning Ambition. So they have a big buff they put on themselves. So right there, it's hard to see on the nameplate, but there's this 20-second magic buff that just went out on the Cinder Weaver from itself, I think. And it's a huge like cast speed increase and damage increase, so you want to purge that immediately if you can. And this is kind of like the first section of the dungeon where having a purge class that knows what's going on is going to be really important. The Blazebound Destroyers aren't something you really have to worry about as the tank, but they do lots of AoE with their Inferno ability. And then they also do a targeted AoE on a player, which just expires after a few seconds and does big damage to that player. I think it's Living Bomb here. Yeah, Living Bomb just went out on full Evoker, which is going to do big damage when it expires. I think he had a big shield for it, so it didn't do any damage, but you know what I mean. Alright, so then you move into the next area. This is a patrol. This is the patrol I was avoiding in that last pull. There's 1 Cinderweaver and 2 Flame Dancers. So the Flame Dancers are the other mob I mentioned earlier. The Flame Dancers basically are the Earth Shapers from the beginning of the dungeon. They're the exact same mobs. Their only ability is this Flame Dance, and if you let it go off, it'll nearly one-shot the group on a 16, which will obviously be deadly on like a 20, so make sure you have stops for those. You cannot interrupt them. You can only stun or knock them, or disorient them. The Cinderweaver is the same as before, it just Cinder bolts to the group. That's going to be a one-shot on higher keys as well, unless tuning happens. Very scary mobs. And then the only last thing, not a huge deal, but this Blaze of Glory cast, as soon as they die, they start doing this cast. It instantly does damage and a small AoE around them, and then also shoots out these projectiles all over the room that you have to avoid as you go to the next area. So both these and the big elementals do on-death animations when they die. Just be careful about that. One of them almost killed Luigi there, actually. So I'm just moving through this area. This is safe to not worry about any patrols because we killed the dragon on this side of the room. If this were the other side of the circle, we'd have to be worrying about the fire dragon at this point, because the fire dragon does this like crazy pat where he lifts off the ground every once in a while and then flies in the circle around the mobs like that. Hard to explain, but you'll see what I mean when you do the dungeon. So same thing as before, I'm pulling back the casters as best I can, kind of away from any patrols that would be past it. It's just a good habit to have. I don't even know if there is a patrol past this pack, but it's a good habit to have either way. This one is a much easier elemental pull because there's 1 Flame Dancer and 1 Cinder Bolter. And it's easier because you can kick every single cast on the Cinderweaver pretty reliably, I'd say, even in a pug. Whereas when there's 2 Cinderweavers, there's definitely going to be bolts going off. Probably several back-to-back because people will overlap kicks. And yeah. So this Flame Dancer, again, you just stop the Flame Dance and then move out of his model as soon as he dies so that you don't take damage from his AoE. Same thing with the Blazebound Destroyer. These are all the same elemental mobs from this point. So that's all the trash mobs in this area. So now all I have left to talk about really is dealing with like these little mobs. These little mobs aren't too bad. They leave a big magic dot on the tank, just like everything else in this dungeon. Just try not to let that stack up too much. Your healer has to have a good dispel keybind so they can dispel you on cooldown this whole entire dungeon. That's about it. So there's 2 groups of 3 Scorchlings on the way to this next elemental. Like as you cross the back of the circle, I'd say, this area. They're worth very little count. You can actually walk by all of them if you can, but you can pull them in for some free count if you need. So same thing with this elemental pack. I'm actually going to pull all the mobs back a little bit away from the patrol area. There's a patrol that walks up to about right here, I believe. And if you left the original caster where it was, they're definitely going to social the patrol when they get there. This is also a much easier pull. All these Blazebound Destroyer pulls are 1 Flame Dancer and 1 Cinderweaver, except for that very first one we fought. So the very first one we fought going left was by far the hardest one. So we're just going to deal with this by using our kicks and our stops on the Flame Dancer and the Cinderweaver as our healer. It keeps us alive from the Blazebound Destroyer. That Inferno cast he does, by the way, leaves like a 10-second, or no, a 5-second dot on the whole group, I should say. That dot is not dispellable either. Alright, so he's casting his on-death stuff. So here, what you want to do, ideally, is just walk through here, not pull the dragon. You're probably going to pull these Scorchlings, but that's okay. You can just walk and not pull the dragon if you hug the wall. We ended up pulling the dragon here, I'm pretty sure. Which is fine, I could show you the mechanics on it. But either way, the goal should be to skip at least one of the dragons, because they are scary. As you can see, I made it past the dragon just fine. And people actually went up onto the wall there too, but I think someone ends up pulling it here. Yeah. So we fight it, which is fine. So he instantly does the breath attack, just like the Thunderhead. This guy's name is Flame Gullet. Thunderhead and Flame Gullet. He's accompanied by some Scorchlings as well. He doesn't have any any group AoE attacks yet, except for that frontal breath, until he hits 50% health. So at the beginning of his fight, it's all about the tank. And I paused it right as he hit me with his first tank hit, the Fire Maw. It leaves a very, very nasty 10-second dot on you and hits you for magic damage, which is going to be very scary on higher keys. You can see that fire dot ticking my health a little bit. Demon Hunter is probably the best tank against magic damage too. So when you see me get chunked on the spot, I mean, that's just scary for most tanks. Alright, so now that he hits 50% health, he gains his second mechanic. So this starts to stack up right here on his unit frame, this stacking buff that's at 2 stacks right now. That's going to deal more and more AoE damage until he dies, basically. So the moment he hits 50% health until he dies, it's a DPS race to kill him before we die. He keeps casting the flame, whatever it's called, tank attack. Flame bite of death. I don't know if that's buffed by his stacks, actually. It might be. But either way, he's important to either skip or kill before he kills the group with that ramping dot. Alright, so now we're on to the last elemental. This is the last mob that you really have to kill. And if you were to skip the dragon, you would want to pull him like off into this area where the friendly mobs are over here, so that the dragon doesn't patrol around here and pull it in some manner. Same thing with the elemental on the other side. You want to pull it back away from where the dragon can potentially patrol. It's hard to explain his patrol, but you'll see what I mean when you do these on life keys. Ignore what I'm doing here. We're just fighting the 4th elemental and I was trying something. Don't do that though. This is the same as before. 1 Cinder Weaver, 1 Flame Dancer, and the Fire Ellie. I don't think we ever let a Flame Dance go off this key, but basically it would have hit the group for about 70% of our health. Maybe it goes off right here, actually. Oh, it does. Perfect. So as you saw there, it hit us for like 60% of our health, actually, on a 16. That'll be deadly on a higher key. Just make sure you have someone assigned to stop the cast with some kind of non-interrupt. Also, I'm playing Vengeance in this video. That's why you keep seeing random demons come attack me. It's because of one of my talents, if you're unfamiliar. And yeah, so after this 4th elemental, regardless of which way you go, you probably want to skip the walking 3-pack. I don't think you ever want to pull the pad there if you can help it. So ideally, we have left this 3-pack up and the dragon behind the 3-pack up, and just never pull that on whichever side we skip. Because the way this boss works is you're going to want to start the boss like in the middle of the road here. This is the boss, by the way, the second boss. And then you're going to want to permanently move the way you cleared for the boss fight, the remainder of the boss fight. And you'll see why. It's kind of obvious once you see the mechanics. I'm telling my group where to bait right now. So the boss always targets range players with the ad spawn, and he spawns ads like every 30 seconds or so, I'd say. So the first ad comes out pretty quick. Spawn on the range players there, and then I told them to just move along the road after that for the rest of the fight. That way, you never kind of get trapped in all the fire puddles that are going to happen. Like, once this ad dies, he's going to leave a permanent fire pool that's, like, humongous, that big. And the boss will also cause other fire pools to spawn. So, you go to the ad as soon as it spawns, dodge the boulder that the boss casts right there. That's just aimed at a random player. Use the defensive for Searing Blows, which is stacking magic damage. Which is interesting. I just saw that you can actually move out of Searing Blows. Either that or I parried every tick, but you can get up to 4 stacks of that dot that she puts on you. So if you actually move out of it, and maybe that's not the case, maybe I just got lucky and parried 3 times, but you take significantly less damage. Never noticed that till just now, actually. Yeah, that's actually this entire fight. You just dodge boulders, have your ranged bait correctly with the ad spawns, stack the boss in the eye when you can, and then don't die to the searing tank channel. Here's the Ritual of Blaze Binding. Spawning the ad, you can jump in right after it goes off. Dodge the boulder. This is that same Inferno cast as the fire elementals do around the ring. And then you want to have a system of kicking this guy as well. So I think it's probably good to just say you'll get the first kick every time, the Roaring Blaze cast as the tank. And then hopefully somebody else is going to get the next kick. So here you can see my health is getting absolutely chunked by that 4 stack of the Searing Blows. A lot of damage. That was also at the same time as the Inferno Dot was out from the Fire Ellie. So that's a pretty nasty combo you should be aware of. It does the same on death animation, forcing people out of melee. You just want to move the boss out of there as soon as you can. The boss kind of moves on a delay, so if you can get her out before she casts something, then that's definitely more ideal. And the rest of this fight is just rinse and repeat. This would be a really hard scaling boss, to be honest. Like, it gets to the point where ads are spawning as the last one dies, and that's very scary. Here's Searing Blows again, doing big damage to me. So on and so on. Those boulders, I think they've fixed most of the interactions with the boulders, but if the boulder was facing, say, the tree right here, it would explode as soon as it hits the tree, and then deal damage like around that radius from the boulder. So you gotta be really careful with that, unless they've actually just fixed all those interactions. You can see me like struggling with the camera there. Here's another Inferno and Searing Blows combo. This would be a good point for me to use meta. I didn't end up doing it here, but those combos can be very high damage. Here's the last burnout, the last boulder. And that's it. So now we're into the third boss area. We're actually overcount by quite a bit. You kind of have to pull everything in this area. You could probably skip the first 2 packs, but I mean, they're the easiest packs of the area, so you might as well just pull them. But if you have 70% count going into this, you're good. We're over by like 11%, because we pulled the dragon, and we pulled the big rock elemental at the beginning that we didn't need to. So in this whole area, there's these Storm Warriors in every pull. These guys have a short Thunderclap AoE that they do very, very often. So anybody that's in melee, it's probably actually a little bit bigger. It's probably like that big. Everyone in melee that's fighting these mobs are going to take extra damage because of that mechanic. They might change that, hopefully. But just something to be aware of. The Primal Thundercloud mobs are kind of like the mobs at the beginning where you don't have to worry about what they do as the tank. They kind of just die. They will try to attack someone, and they leave a ground effect when they do, and then they just die afterward. So no worries on those. The important mob in this pull is this Tempest Channeler. She exists here, one more pack up there, and then the last mob of the dungeon before the boss is like an elite version of them. But what they do is like a very huge group AoE damaging ability. So you can see the Thunderclaps are going off. She's casting Thunderbolt on the tank, and then the major ability is this Lightning Storm AoE. The Lightning Storm is chunking everybody for a lot of damage. That first one happens like 3 or 4 seconds into the pull. And then she goes back to Thunderbolting. I think she summons more of those little primal lightning dudes as well. Lightning Storm happens very frequently. Hopefully they nerf that a little bit. Because compared to other dungeons, this place has some crazy HPS requirements. And this is only a 16, mind you. We have 4 sets and everything. Anyway, so that's how you deal with that mob. The Storm Warriors, hopefully we'll get a nerf as well, or just some kind of iteration on how their Thunderclap works. This is a much easier pull. We had 2 more Storm Warriors in this pull. There were like 4 in that first one, by the way. They just do the Thunderclap and melee the tank, and then the new mob is the Flame Channeler. Flame Channeler just does a channeled ability that you kick, and that's about it. He's not too bad. So this is where you're going to assign people to kick Flash Fire. So Flash Fire puts a circle on someone immediately. It went around Tettles there. If it started the channel, if it completed the wind-up cast and started the channel, then Tettles would have taken big damage every second until it stopped. But we kicked it in time, so he took no damage. I pulled some of the little guys off on the right. Those are the same mobs as before. They don't do very much. So Flashfire actually channeled on me for a second there. Let me back up. This is why you want to kick that. It's channeling. As soon as it finishes the windup, it starts damaging me very quickly. And it doesn't AoE around me, and so it hit the 2 melee players as well, I think. Either that or they got hit by the Thunderclap from the Storm Warriors. So yeah, that's the Flame Channeler. And I didn't do it in this video as well, but now I think it's better to go around this pillar this way and not fight this pack yet. You can fight that pack last. So this has another Storm Channeler person, but the more important pack that you want to fight next, because you probably have cooldowns coming up now, is the very last pack of the dungeon. But I'll go through this pull first, since that's what I did in this VOD. So this one has a combination of both a Flame Channeler and the Lightning Storm mob. And some more of the Thunderclap mobs as well. Looks like there's only one Thunderclap mob in this one. The Lightning Storm's going, kick the Flame Channeler as early as you can. Flashfire is that ability name. Any spare kicks can go onto the Thunderbolt casts, but they're not really that important since they just do a tiny little bit of damage to the tank. Survive the Lightning Storm and then you're good. Honestly, if you pull them in this order, you may want to wait and like mentally prepare your group for this pull, because what happens is as soon as you pull this, the elite Lightning Channeler mob, High Channeler there, she does the Lightning Storm like 2 seconds into the pull. And right before she does the Lightning Storm, she also does a couple of casts which put debuffs on the group and distract the healer. So I'll tell you what to do. So as soon as you pull, you want to kick this mob immediately, because if she puts out these debuffs, the healer will be behind on healing from the get-go, and that just is not good for anybody. So she will put a debuff on the tank, Shock Blast there, boom, and then she does a second one on a random melee player, or just someone in melee range, I think. Boom. So they hit both of us for a portion of our health, puts a dot on us, is dispellable, so it's gonna take the healer's attention, and already she's already casting Lightning Storm. So what you want to do is make sure you kick that very first cast, and then have everyone use defensives, or just have someone ready to do big healing immediately on pull. Now she does like some series of abilities where she summons more of those primal thunderclouds. And then she does this new ability called Tempest Storms. So Tempest Storms is just this is actually the best ability in the fight. It's the easiest ability in the fight for now, until there's like a high DPS check. But she doesn't do anything for the duration of this cast, except for just wait until her shield is broken. If you don't break the shield by the end of the 10-second cast, then she kills the group. But for now, it's not too difficult to break. So there it is. As soon as she's done, she does Shock Blast again. Again, if you kick this immediately, she won't even try to do the second Shock Blast, which is ideal. So Sho actually kicked that, and then she just moves on to her next abilities. The only use case in where you wouldn't want to interrupt that is if you're a Prot Warrior and you have Spell Reflect, because that is reflectable and does big damage. So here's a second Lightning Storm. Same damage values as all the prior Lightning Storm mobs, as far as I can tell. And then she does Tempest Storms again. So she kind of alternates Lightning Storm and Tempest Storms, the shield. As you can see, there's 2 more Storm Warriors in this pull, just making Thunderclap, making melee have a harder time living than ranged. Make sure you're ready to kick, and rinse and repeat. Don't worry about kicking those crackling detonations. It's kind of those primal guys are kind of bait, because the crackling detonation doesn't really do anything anyway. It just makes them jump to the swirly that they put on the ground, and then as soon as they jump to their swirly, they die. So you don't actually want to spend kicks on those. I'm just pulling them in to avoid having to fight them during the boss. And they might be a good funnel if you have a sub-rogue or some spec that benefits single target from multiple mobs. So there's the crackling detonations. They just kill themselves basically. And you rinse and repeat until this mini boss is dead. This is the hardest pull in the dungeon, I'd say. This is a big lust on a higher fort key. The last boss is also very challenging, so if it's not for it, I think you definitely want to lust the boss, which we'll get into right now. This boss has Surprise, a massive magic tank hit, and a bunch of party damage at the same time. This is a two-phase fight. The first phase, he'll hop down. He starts right there, but you want to pull him back to fight him in this whole first phase around here or even farther back if you can get him there in time. The big thing you should know as a tank is that he's going to cast a thing called Storm Slam every 10 seconds. The first one happens about 5 seconds in, I think. And you always want to stack him with his dragon in phase 1 as best you can. So here's Storm Slam. Chunked me for a lot of my health on just a 16. And I'm a DH, so I'm going to take less magic damage than most tanks too, which is frightening. And he leaves a debuff on you, which has to be dispelled as soon as possible, because it makes you take double damage from basically all magic damage. So there's another Storm Slam. You can see that debuff up there. My healer's done this a few times, so he's going to dispel me pretty quick. Boom, it's gone. But if you ever have that debuff, by the time he Storm Slams you again, you're going to take double damage, so just be aware of that. Another Storm Slam. I'm keeping him here because the dragon comes down at some radius near the boss. So like ideally he lands here, which is really nice for us. We can get some good cleave on the dragon. And the dragon is your prio target as well, because as soon as the dragon dies in P2, the fight is basically over. Alright, so continuing here. And the only other thing I haven't mentioned yet about this is the dragon puts out like a fiery spit debuff on a player in phase 1, which puts a circle around them, and they need to run out to somewhere out of the group with it. So as you can see, Settle's got the circle right there. That's going to do big damage to him while the dot is on him, and then it drops, and it leaves a bunch of crap all over the floor. There's the stuff on the floor. Now, the nice thing about this is the winds can help you out and blow this fire off the boss arena. There's the winds right there. You can see the fire kind of moving that direction. And the winds are RNG as far as I can tell as well. So you can get kind of screwed by it. By the puddles just like not leaving the boss platform. But yeah, this is where the real hard part of the fight is. So if you have Lust, this is where you want to Lust. As soon as he hops on the dragon, he always starts phase 2 in this location. So you want to drop the first set of puddles on this small quadrant of the room over here, and then move the boss that way after everyone drops these puddles. I actually didn't move in time here, so I kind of get myself trapped. But as you can see, everybody's taking that same debuff worth of damage at the same time now, and it's crazy because this dude is also Storm Slamming you at the same time. So you gotta have big cooldowns right here. I got trapped by the winds here, so I actually am trapped in all these fire puddles. There's no way I'm not going to get a debuff, so I just leap through the fire puddles and get another debuff. I should have mentioned that earlier, but whenever you touch one of these fires, you just get the same debuff again. So I'm trying to move the boss out of here. I'm going to drop my puddles and then move everything as far as I can out of that area so we have more space. This boss is actually nuts. There's a lot going on, lots of high damaging abilities. Thundering also doesn't help because you have to manage clearing with your partner while keeping track of Storm Slam and the winds and the fire debuffs. And yeah, that's why you definitely want to Lust there. But once the dragon dies, all the fire debuffs are basically done, and you just deal with the humanoid boss. I locked myself. His interrupting ability locks like Fist of Fury and Feldev, I think. Kind of frustrating. Any kind of channeled abilities. Yeah, hopefully this boss gets nerfed a little bit. I don't think the general public is gonna have a good time with him. But we'll see. We have a few more weeks until Dragonflight. Once again, good luck with this dungeon. That's a huge magic damage dungeon. It's gonna be one of the harder ones, I think. And if I missed anything, there's a lot in that place. Let me know in the comments so that other people can benefit, and I'll see you guys in the next one.